With the new Runeglass Gems, we can increase our damage either by gaining plus 5% melee damage on our armor, or we can go full elemental damage and get plus 10% damage on our armor. We also get an elemental dot on our weapons that will do damage each second. So for this new world video, I want to test what damage is the best for a melee class. I'm going to test if the elemental damage will scale with the new elemental dot damage and with an elemental attunement on our weapon. For this test, I'll be using a greatsword with an elemental chain perk on it, and I'll be running 150 strength and 150 dex just to max out the damage. I will also be using a slash damage ring and an elemental damage ring to test melee versus elemental damage. After the test, I'll be adjusting the elemental chain damage so it's on par with elemental attunement damage, because it's extremely difficult to get the attunement perk on a weapon in the PTR. All the damage numbers for this test are damage per second because I can auto attack once per second with the greatsword. I know the elemental dot will tick 3 times, but it takes 1 second per tick, so I wanted to keep it as fair as possible and test damage per second. The first test that we will be doing is the melee DPS armor, so I'll be running full increase on my armor for melee DPS, and then I'll also slot in an opal with melee increased damage. For this, I'm also running a slash damage ring just to make sure we keep it even. Now for the base number of damage, we got 1956. We didn't do any dot damage because we don't have the dot in there. And then we have chain damage. We did 267, giving us the grand total of 2223. If we adjust this for attunement damage, for example, if we have frost attunement, then we get about 275 damage for frost attunement. So the actual total will be 2231, giving us the total damage. If we move on, we go to the next test. This one we will be testing with the dot damage, the frost dot on the weapon. But for this one, we will go melee DPS armor plus the opal. So let's take a look. For the damage, we get 1931, and then we get the dot damage, which will be 147. The chain damage is 267, and then the total will get 2345. If we adjust this to the frost attunement, the frost attunement will do 275 instead of chain, and the total would be 2353. Now what will we compare? If we compare the melee DPS opal against the frost damage dot, then the difference is about 5.4%. So what's the difference here? What should you go? Probably go with the melee DPS armor with the opal frost dot, which is better than just pure melee damage per second. So if you just auto attack, this is per second. But what about elemental armor? Now let's slot in all the elemental gems in our armor, giving us about a 10% increase. Let's take a look at the damage. First off, let's put an opal frost in the thing so that we can have a frost dot and an elemental dot, which should increase our elemental damage. For the base damage, it's 1785. Our dot damage went to 163 damage. The chain damage went to 306 damage. For the total, it's 2254. But if we adjust it for frost attunement, then it's 315, giving us a total of 2263 damage. So what should we do? Let's compare the melee DPS armor against the elemental DPS armor. So far, the difference is about 90 damage difference. So it's not a lot, but for the percentage difference, it is about 5.4% difference. So you lose out on damage if you go full elemental armor with an frost damage ring. So that's how much damage you will be losing. But there's more. Let's test the Aquamarine. If we slot in an Aquamarine in the greatsword, let's take a look. For this one, it's also elemental DPS armor with an Aquamarine with melee damage on it. For the damage, it did 1677. No dot damage because we don't have the gem in. And then for the chain, it's 278. Plus for the total, it's 1955. If we adjust it for frost attunement, it is 286. So the total will be 1963. So it still did less damage than the previous one, but let's test apples to apples. For the next one, we're going to slot in a Aquamarine frost dot damage so that we can compare. It's still the elemental damage armor as well. So let's take a look. For the base damage, it went up to 1651. Then the dot damage went to 148. And then the chain ice damage went to 278. And the total is 2077. If we adjust it for frost attunement, which is the frost attunement will do 286, and the total is 2085 damage. So definitely the frost dot wins always. Frost dot is definitely the best way to go for damage per second. But what if we compare the best damage for the melee DPS and the Aquamarine? If we compare it for the melee DPS, Opal frost dot, and for the elemental DPS armor, Aquamarine frost dot, we only get 2085 damage. So the damage difference is about 268 damage difference, and the percentage is 11.3%. So what would I run personally if I were to want best in slot damage? Then I'll probably run the DPS armor with the melee damage on the armor, and I'll slot in an elemental dot gem on my weapon so that I can do the best damage. If you want to find out if you should run shirking heals or shirking fortification, well, I already did a video on that and you can go watch that video right here.